Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Organic Certification Basics. My name is Robert Maggiani and I'm a Sustainable Ag Specialist with the National Center for Appropriate Technology, more commonly known as NCAT. NCAT is a nationwide nonprofit organization with 6 regional headquarters across the country and the central office in Butte, Montana. We work on issues pertaining to sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy, and sustainable communities. This webinar comes to you from the Southwest Regional Office located in San Antonio, Texas. Today's webinar is part of NCAT's Texas Organic Initiative, which is a long-term effort to dramatically increase the production and sales of organic produce in Texas. Major funding for today's webinar comes from the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program as administered by the Texas Department of Agriculture. We'd like to thank TDA for their support, and we are also grateful for the support from the Organic Transitions Program of USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Today's presentation will be about 45 minutes long, and we'll follow it up with time for questions from you folks who are attending. As you're listening, you can type in any question you might have in the questions box on your screen, and I'll gather them up and have the speakers answer as many as we have time for when Mr. Johnson finishes his presentation. Please don't hesitate to ask questions during the webinar. Chances are we won't be able to get to all of them during the webinar, but NCAT Sustainable Ag experts will get back to you about your questions via email in the days to come. And the next hour or so isn't the only chance for you to ask questions. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on NCAT's ATRA webpage. There's a feature on the page called Ask an Ag Expert, where you can send us emails with any questions you might have. Or you might want to call our Sustainable Ag helpline number, which is 1-800-346-9140. We welcome your questions on any sustainable ag subject, not just today's webinar topic. And it's worth mentioning that it's a free service. If you didn't get the phone number and the web address, don't worry. We'll have it on screen at the end of the webinar. And also, just before we begin, I want to remind y'all that we're to take a few minutes to complete the survey for today's webinar. When the seminar is over and you sign out, you'll get the survey right away. The survey will help us to improve our webinars in the future, and we sure appreciate your taking part in it. And also, before we start, let me mention the webinar that we'll host next Thursday, also at noon Central Daylight Time. It will be entitled, What's in an Organic Farm Plan? And it features the TDA staffer in charge of their organics program and one of Austin's better-known farmers. So let me introduce to you today's speakers. Leslie McKinnon, our first speaker, has been an organic certifier, reviewer, and educator, and served as coordinator for the Organic Certification Program at the Texas Department of Agriculture for over 12 years. For the past 5 years, she has provided consulting services to farmers and other businesses interested in becoming certified organic. She's active in the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, TOFGA, and is helping to build local, sustainable organic food systems in Texas. Our second speaker is Mr. Brenton Johnson, the owner of Johnson's Backyard Gardens in Austin, Texas. They sell wholesale to major retail chains such as H-E-B and Whole Foods. They have a CSA program that serves over 1,000 subscribers, and they sell at many farmers markets throughout Texas. Their story is the epitome of scaling up a farm. Brenton will tell us that story and how being certified organic helps them become better farmers. So now I will turn the microphone over to Leslie. Leslie?
Thank you, Robert. Today I'll just be going over the basic concepts of organic certification and the process of becoming certified. Next slide. The first step in the process is to select an accredited certifying agent. There's a list of accredited certifiers on the National Organic Program website that I'll have at the end of my presentation. Where you can find a certifier that is suited best to you and to your farming operation. You want to find a certifying agent who is familiar with the type of farming operation that you have, that may already be operating in the local area and that you feel like has the kind of knowledge and background that you're looking for. It's also important when you're selecting a certifying agent that you consider the fee structures. Each certifying agent has different a fee schedule, and so they vary quite a bit. You may want to look at that when you're selecting a certifying agent. But you're allowed to use any certifying agent that is accredited under the USDA's National Organic Program. So you'll submit your application with supporting documentation and fees to the certifier you select. There will be an on-site inspection, and finally, a certification decision. So I'll look at these steps in more detail in these slides that come next. So the application process is you download or get by mail an application packet from the certifier you've selected. Be sure that you do get their forms because they're more familiar with those. And as I said, the fees do vary from one certifier to another, so be sure that you've considered that. Some certifiers will assess a fee based on sales. Others don't do that. There's also inspection fees to consider for some certifiers if they are having to travel, if an inspector has to travel to your farm. So look at the cost of certification as part of your decision. Once you've submitted your application to the certifier, they'll do an initial review where they make sure that you've included all of the information that they need and that there aren't any obvious barriers to certification in what you have told them on your application. They'll then assign the file to an inspector, and the inspector contacts you to schedule the inspection at your farm. After the inspection is complete, the inspector writes an inspection report that they send back to the certifying agent. The certifier is going to do a final review of the inspection report in order to reach the final certification decision. Next. The certification decision is going to be based on that final review. If they find that everything is in compliance with the organic standards, the certificate will be immediately issued. However, if they do find anything that is not exactly in compliance with the standards, you don't need to panic. They will issue a formal letter that's called a notice of noncompliance. They'll send that to you, which is basically the certifier's way of asking you for additional information, or if there is a problem that needs to be corrected, they'll let you know that. You have the opportunity to respond to that notice of noncompliance with either a proposed correction for that problem or possibly an explanation or rebuttal of their decision if they didn't understand something correctly. So that response may resolve the notice of noncompliance. If it does not, you are also entitled to request mediation with the certifying agent, or ultimately you can appeal a certifier's decision to the National Organic Program if you feel that the certifier has not correctly interpreted the regulations. So finally, after you have resolved any possible non-compliant issue, the certificate would be issued to you. Next. So what is organic production? The rule defines organic production as a production system that integrates cultural, biological, and mechanical practices in order to foster the cycling of natural resources and nutrients, to promote ecological balance in the system, and to conserve biodiversity. So this is the overall goal of organic production. It's important to see that organic production is a systems approach, and you're looking at the farm as an ecosystem, looking at all of the different things that are interrelated on the farm and that have an impact on growing crops. Next. So what are the requirements for a producer under the National Organic Standards? in a nutshell, you do need to submit a farm history, outline the history of the land, develop a farm plan according to the organic principles. It's important that you utilize preventative management practices to avoid problems occurring first, and before you resort to input materials or any kind of emergency response type of management. The regulation also requires a crop rotation system, or in some cases a system that increases and maintains biological diversity in a perennial cropping system. And finally, there's a requirement to maintain records of the operation and what your practices are, and that you followed the farm plan that you have submitted to the certifying agent. Next. So, farm history. Let's look at each of these in more detail. What the certifier is interested in is the past 3 years, how the land has been used, what kinds of crops have been grown, if you have been doing crop rotation, if you've used any kind of inputs. So this will be used to evaluate the farm and see if it's eligible for organic certification. The regulations require that there have been no prohibited materials used on the land for at least 36 months or 3 years prior to the harvest of an organic crop. So that's why the certifier asks you for a 3-year history of the land use. Now, this may be accomplished through your own personal affidavit in the form of the application documentation you submit. You may just be telling them what you've done for the past 3 years if you've been in possession of the land for at least 3 years. However, if you're buying new land or if it has been leased to another farmer, you may need to obtain an affidavit from the previous owner or manager of the farm. If you've participated in Farm Service Agency programs, you may have the FSA crop records that you can use as part of your documentation of the 3-year history. Likewise, if you're part of the Natural Resource Conservation Service conservation plan, if they have a conservation plan drawn up for you, then you can use your NRCS records to document the past 3 years. Or if the land's been laid out under a conservation reserve program, those CRP records can be used. And that's often how new farmers get into organic certification. Often, in my past experience, the new land would be brought in after it was ending a CRP or a conservation reserve period where nothing had been used for a period of time, so it was eligible to go straight into organic status. Next. So I had mentioned that you need to develop a farm plan according to organic principles. And so what are the parts of this farm plan? Now, I won't go into as much detail on this today as you can hear next week if you sign up for the webinar on more detail about the farm plan. But just in a nutshell, a farm plan would include a farm map that shows all of the different fields in any kind of landmarks or any stationary buildings, things on the map. Fields do have to have distinct defined borders so that you know where one field ends and the next one starts. And on the edges of the farm, you need adequate buffer zones that are sufficient to prevent contamination of your organic crop from any activities off the farm by your neighbor. Your farm plan also describes your farming practices and the procedures you use. It will list all of the input materials you know that you'll be using and any products that you use. Whether these inputs are things that are created on the farm, such as compost or possibly animal manures, or things that are purchased, you'll need to list all of your planned inputs in your farm plan. You also are asked to describe monitoring practices, and this is, how do you check to see that your farm plan is successful, is working the way you want it to. You describe your record-keeping system, and then also you will describe how you prevent commingling of organic and non-organic crops and prevent contamination of your organic crops with any materials that might be prohibited substances. Next. Your farming practices need to be based on preventative management. So that's your first line of defense before using allowed inputs. This is one of the ways that organic farming differs from conventional farming, is instead of reacting to a problem after it happens, you try to proactively prevent problems from becoming severe. One of these methods is crop rotation, and it's a very, very important part of an organic system, because crop rotation can help you manage your soil fertility. It can help to prevent the occurrence of diseases, and it can break the life cycle of insect pests so that they don't build up and become a more serious problem. So crop rotation is really one of the key practices to use in an organic system. You also want to be sure that you're managing crop nutrients in the soil so that your crop is getting all the nutrients that it needs. Sanitation practices are important to remove disease organisms, to prevent weeds from going to seed, and to eliminate overwintering habitat for pests. So you need to keep areas clean to prevent those problems from happening. It's also very important to select varieties that are well adapted for your area. And also you may want to select varieties that have good resistance to any pests or diseases that are normally a problem in your area. So you can check with your extension agent to find out varieties that are well selected for your local area. Practices also would include mechanical and physical controls, such as just weeding, hoeing or hand weeding. Physical controls such as barriers, things like row cover to prevent insect damage on crops. So these are the kinds of things that all fall under the umbrella of preventative management, things you can do to prevent problems from occurring. Next. So crop rotation, I've talked about how important that is. It's defined in the rule as the practice of alternating the annual crops on a specific field so that the same thing is not grown year after year on the same field. That, like I said, will help to minimize the overwintering of pests, the accumulation of disease organisms, and it will also help maintain fertility in the soil if you're using crops that will add fertility, such as legumes or other nitrogen-fixing crops in your crop rotation. Now, in the case of perennial cropping systems, the definition actually has a separate paragraph on that says that since you're not going to rotate a perennial system year after year, you use things such as alley cropping, intercropping, and hedgerows in order to introduce more biological diversity into the system instead of actually doing crop rotation. Next. What you want to focus on in either one of these systems, whether it's an annual or perennial system, is the objectives of crop rotation, which are to improve the organic matter content in the soil, to provide insect, weed, and disease management, to manage your nutrients, whether you have too much of something or not enough of something. You can use crop rotation to help with those kinds of issues, and also to provide erosion control. Next. The result of good soil management will increase the organic matter in your soil, and that is important because the organic matter is what feeds the microorganisms in the soil. Microorganisms are the lifeblood of the soil. If you feed the soil, then the soil is going to feed the plant. The microorganisms are breaking down the organic matter because the organic matter itself does not directly provide nutrients to the plant. If you don't have a healthy living soil, then the organic matter is not releasing the nutrients that it contains to the plants. But when you have a good, healthy microbial population in the soil, you'll have healthy, vigorously growing plants that can withstand some pest damage and that have a better chance of expressing any inherent disease resistance that they have. They'll be less susceptible to diseases. The other benefit is that it improves the soil structure. Microorganisms in the soil will help to glue those soil particles together, and that enables rain, when you do get rain, for it to infiltrate into the soil, soak in, instead of running off. And therefore, that helps reduce soil erosion. You don't want to put so much effort into building your soil just to have it wash away and when you get a good rain. Next. When it does come to input products, sometimes there will be a situation that despite your preventative practices, you find a situation where you have to use some sort of an input product, whether it be a fertility product or a pest management product. But these should be your second line of defense. You know, as I said, prevention first, and then, when necessary, you would use an input product. You always have to evaluate these input products, anything you bring in from off the farm, very, very carefully. That's one of the things that can trip up your organic certification faster than anything, is using a product that contains an ingredient, even a very small amount of an ingredient, that is prohibited. One of the tools you can use to evaluate products is to check on the Organic Material Review Institute's website, or OMRI. OMRI reviews products. Manufacturers pay to have those products reviewed, and OMRI will review the products to determine whether they are allowed for use in organic production. So they look at all of the details, every ingredient in the product and how it's manufactured, to make that determination. So they're a good resource. However, they don't review every product that's out in the marketplace, and there are good products that are available that may not be on the OMRI list because the manufacturer has not chosen to submit their product for that review. So you can evaluate the products yourself, look at what the product is made of, not just a final nutrient analysis, but what it's actually derived from. And always be sure you keep any labels, any material safety data sheets or MSDSs, any invoices from the company or from your feed co-op, wherever you're buying a product, and any communication with a manufacturer about the suitability for that product to be used in organic production. You may have to contact a manufacturer directly to get all the information that you need. Just keep all of that in your records. Do be very, very careful and watch out for misleading products. You often see products in the marketplace that use the word organic or may use the word all natural, different descriptions to make you believe that these are eco-friendly products. That doesn't necessarily mean that those products are allowed for use in organic production. It's important that you submit any planned inputs to your certifier prior to using those so that they can make sure that those inputs are allowed. Next. How do you make that determination, whether some substance is allowed or not? For that, you have to go to the actual regulation, the National Organic Standards, and the sections 205.601 through 205.606 that establish the national list. It's a little bit tricky, though, so you have to keep in mind that the national list is actually a list of exceptions to the general rule. The general rule is that natural substances, such as mulches or straw or crop residues, natural substances are allowed unless they are specifically listed in the national list as prohibited. Likewise, in general, all synthetic substances are prohibited unless they are specifically listed in the national list as allowed. So I know that's confusing, but that's just, the final say, excuse me, the final say for any material, whether it's allowed or not, is the national list. Of course, most of your commercial synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides are prohibited. Any multi-ingredient input, like I said, you need to be very careful how you evaluate that and make sure it's in compliance with the national list before you use it. Otherwise, it could jeopardize your organic certification. This includes inert ingredients such as pesticide products. Often list active ingredients and inert ingredients. They don't disclose what those inerts are. Sometimes those can include prohibited substances in the inert ingredients, so be very careful with that. It is possible to petition the National Organic Standards Board to add another material to the national list. However, that's a very long, drawn-out process. It normally takes 2 to 3 years for it to go through the entire process of being petitioned, considered, and added as part of the rules. So it's not an emergency request by any means. It's something that it takes a long time to get that done. Next. Another part of your farm plan is your monitoring practices to see if what you're doing, the practices and prevention that you're using, are these things being effective? Are they achieving the result that you intended? So these are things like soil fertility tests or water quality tests to make sure you don't have excess nutrients leaching out into the water table, or that your livestock activities are not polluting surface waters. You might want to test for soil microbiology to see how your practices are affecting the microorganisms in the soil. Often farmers will do pest or disease scouting, where you just go out and check to see if you observe pests or disease symptoms, and you can make notes in a journal or a calendar, whatever type of record keeping you've chosen, a scouting log, whatever. But you might be monitoring the effectiveness that way. Sometimes you'll just take notes on the crop condition, whether it looks healthy and is growing quickly, or whether it seems weak and spindly or lacking in nutrients. You'll evaluate crop condition to see if your fertility program is working. Also monitoring weed populations. If you keep notes of that, you can see what is occurring in the field and what practices you might consider in the future to prevent that weed from being a problem. Next. You also need to outline how you will prevent commingling and contamination. Commingling is especially important on any operation that grows both organic and non-organic crops. It's important that you use clean equipment, that if you use equipment in both an organic field and a non-organic field, that it's always cleaned thoroughly before going back to the organic field. If you use any kind of bins to harvest vegetables or totes or any kind of packaging, they need to be stored in a way that does not expose them to any prohibited substances. Another practice to prevent contamination of organic crops is having adequate buffer zones. If your farm is next to a conventional farm and they spray, you want to be sure that there's enough of a buffer zone that their activities will not result in contamination of your organic crop. Likewise, if you have organic and non-organic on the same farm, you may need separate storage facilities for organic crops and non-organic crops that are clearly identified, so there's no confusion. You want to always be sure you avoid applying any prohibited substances near your organic crops. I know I saw a farm once where they had a can of wasp spray and didn't realize that they were potentially contaminating their organic storage because they were spraying for wasps in the barn. So it's important to think about those things. Next. Record keeping is one of those things that often people are intimidated by or put off by, but it really is reasonable. The record keeping should be adapted to your farming operation. It's whatever works for you. It does need to be sufficient to demonstrate that you are in compliance with the rule, that you are following the farm plan that you outlined, you're doing those things you said you were going to do, and that you have records of purchases and so forth. The record should reflect all of your activities and all transactions, whether it's purchases or sales of product. So it's just an ongoing diligence to make sure you have things written down and keep those activities reflected in the records. Records should be detailed enough to be understood and audited by the organic inspector. And what I mean by audited is sometimes they will come and they'll want to look at all of the inputs that went into a field, what your harvest yield was, and then all of your sales. And the records need to be coherent enough and linked so that you can link the purchase of an input to where it was used on a specific field and the crop that was planted and the crop that was harvested and sold. So they do need to have some coherence within the records and be able to track forwards or backwards. There is a requirement in the rule that records be maintained for at least 5 years after they're created. They also have to be made available during the inspection, and you have to allow an inspector or a representative from the USDA National Organic Program to copy those on request. Next. The main thing to remember is just to keep it simple. Make it work for you. Keep your records organized all in one place. That will really simplify the inspection process for you. And if you're paying for an inspector's time, then that will save you money. It also makes your work easier in that you can access your records and remember what variety was that last year that worked so well, or what practice was it, what fertility product did I use, or how did I time the application of manure or compost to the field that really seemed to work well. It makes your planning better and gives you records to look back on. So also, like I said, does help your future planning, but remember that you do need to keep those records for 5 years according to the rule. Next. There are a couple of questions that I'll briefly talk about because these are questions that often come up. One is about the use of organic seed, or if you're allowed to use untreated conventional seed in some cases. And it is true that is allowed, but organic seed is required unless you can show that you have made a good faith effort to locate organic seed, and it is not commercially available. If you've done that, then you're allowed to use untreated, conventionally produced seed. Of course, it has to be untreated. Any pesticide or fungicide treatment would be the same as applying prohibited substance to your field. So it would negate your certification. When they say commercially available, they mean the ability to obtain that production input, that seed, in an appropriate form, quality, or quantity that will fulfill an essential function in your organic farm plan. So you can address that you need a specific seed quality, that some seed sources may not have good germination, so you tried that and it didn't work. That would be a seed quality issue. Quantity would be, if the only organic seed is available in the, the small garden packets, where you get an ounce, at most an ounce of seed, and you need 50 pounds for your field. That's a quantity issue. But you have to demonstrate to your certifying agent how it fulfills an essential function in your farm plan. Now, it could be a market issue, that a particular variety is important to you. Say you're growing Asian vegetables for a particular restaurant market, then that's a specific quality of that variety that is important to your system. So you do have to document that you have made a good faith effort to locate organic seed, and then if you can show that you have contacted a reasonable number of suppliers, most certifiers will accept about 3 contacts of suppliers that normally provide organic seed. But so you've looked in the right place and made a decent effort to find organic seed, and it was not available, then you can use the untreated conventional seed. Now, there is one exception that is allowed if there is a federal or state phytosanitary requirement in the United States to use that only treated seed is allowed. Then that is the only exception when it would be allowable under an organic system. If you're faced with something like that, be sure to check it out with your certifying agent first. The other question that comes up a lot is about using manure. And in organic farming, or manure use, that uncomposted manure, it's allowed with certain restrictions. If it's on a crop for human consumption, it has to be applied at least 90 days before harvest if the edible portion of the crop does not contact the soil. So that would be, say, sweet corn, if the crop is up off of the ground. But if you're growing a crop, lettuces or root crops that are in contact with the soil, the uncomposted manure has to be used at least 120 days prior to harvest. Now, on any crops that are not intended for human consumption, such as pastures or cover crops that will be plowed under, the manure can be used at any time for that purpose. And the last question I'll go over quickly is the compost requirements. If you're purchasing compost or if you're producing compost on your farm, it's important that you know that the rule has specific time and temperature requirements for compost, especially if it contains any manure, any animal manures. I won't go into all the details, but just be aware of that and check with your certifying agent. That's another thing that you would need to document in your record keeping if you are producing manure, that you've met those time and temperature requirements. Next. And finally, these are the websites that I've mentioned during my talk that you may want to jot down. The National Organic Program is a great source of information. They do have a guide to organic production that is very useful and very thorough. That's also where you can link to the actual regulation. You can find the list of certifying agents, so there's a number of resources there that provide good information. The ATRA website is one that I always recommend. This ATRA is a program of NCAT, and they have free publications online on all sorts of aspects of organic production. They have a workbook that you can go through. They have sample forms. They have free publications on a number of different topics relating to production, relating to marketing. It's really an invaluable resource that I highly recommend. The Extension Service has a nationwide e-organic website that has good resource information as well. And finally, the Organic Material Review Institute website, www.omri.org, is where you can go and check to see if they have already reviewed a particular input product to make sure that it's allowed for use in organic production. So that's the some of my talk. So I will now turn it over to Brenton Johnson.
Hello, this is Brenton Johnson. I'm the owner of Johnson's Backyard Garden in Austin, Texas. And I started farming in my backyard in 2004, and a little 30 by 50 foot backyard garden. And it's hard to believe today that our farm has grown to about 205 acres and 2 locations. We've got about 100 employees. I think this year our sales will be about $5 million. And so it's really, as my wife says, my hobby got out of control. But I started out in college with an interest in agriculture. I was studying mechanical engineering, and I ended up going to talk to my dean and find out about, I was just about to graduate in mechanical engineering. I'd worked for 2 years in industry, and it was just a path that really, after I got just about to graduate, it wasn't what I was interested in doing when I grew up and joined the workforce. And lucky enough, my dean was real helpful to steer me into the direction of the agricultural engineering department, and I ended up finishing the last year and a half of my education at Auburn and got a degree in ag engineering, and it was really the best choice that I could have made, I think. My grandmother was so proud of me when I graduated. She's like, "Brent, you're an engineer now." And I had other visions. I guess I got into the Grateful Dead in college and sold lots of grilled cheeses in parking lots around the country, having a real good time. And I told my grandmother, I said, "Mama, no, I just want to go and I want to be a farmer." And she says, "Brent," she says, "if you want to, you go and apply for some of those hippie organic farms." She's like, "but at least you better put your application in for a real job." And so lucky enough, I did take my grandmother's advice and ended up putting an application in for a few acceptable jobs with the government doing water conservation work, and I ended up getting hired for the government jobs before I ended up working on organic, taking an internship on a farm. I ended up working with the federal government for 10 years as the water conservation program manager for the Bureau of Reclamation. I worked in Wyoming for 3 years. While I was there, I was working with irrigation districts in Kansas and Oklahoma, Nebraska, Wyoming, and Texas. In 2001, I ended up moving to Austin, Texas, and the whole time, since I graduated, I still maintain that love for growing things. And I had 2 garden plots that I rented from the cooperative extension while I was in Wyoming, and Wyoming is where you do extreme gardening. I really was surprised by the way that people garden there, because you would plant really, really late in the year, and people would put up pieces of plywood and windbreaks for their plants. And then right when the tomatoes were setting fruit, I remember we had to put out sheets over our plants to cover them up for the snow that was coming. And then the next day, everybody came out and dusted off about a foot of snow, and they got 2 more weeks of growth out of their plants. But I moved down to Texas in 2001, and got married to my high school sweetheart, and we bought a house just east of downtown Austin in a rapidly changing part of town. Now the house has gone up to about $500,000. It's two blocks east of downtown Austin. But my wife says, "I'm going to go out of town for a few weeks to take the kids home and the family, and when I come back, this place better be livable." And I ended up redoing the whole house. And as soon as she got back, we started with a small little backyard garden And I think the first time that we went to the farmers market was like the 2004. We went the fall of 2004, the winter of 2004, and it was really kind of like being at a Grateful Dead concert for me, because I just took all the vegetables in the yard and piled them up on the table, and the people, you know, at the market at this time, I think the downtown farmers market in Austin had just been going for a year or so. But they were like, "Where's your farm?" And I'm like, "Well, it's about a mile from here. You could walk to it from, you know, here." And they're like, "You grow all this in your backyard?" And they said, "Well, how much for this broccoli? It's beautiful." And I guess that was the part that I just hadn't prepared for yet, because I didn't even know how much to charge for the produce. So I told everyone, I said, "Well, you guys just pay me what you think it's worth." And whenever I ended up at the end of the day, I'd made about $100, and I called my grandmother. She's like, "Brenton," she's like, "I just want to ask you one thing. Are you sure you're selling vegetables?" But she kind of kept a close eye on me. I guess now that my grandmother's still living, she's about, I think she's going to turn 90 years old this year, but she worked real hard to make a success out of me, but I gave her a real tough time growing up. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of how I got started into farming, and then talk a little bit about organics and why we have decided to become an organic farm. When I first started in the backyard, you know, I really just didn't see an opportunity. I didn't. It wasn't something that being certified organic was important to my customers. And in the backyard, we didn't initially become certified organic, and we actually talked about it in communications to our customers. And I started out with a newsletter when I was first beginning, and had some discussions, and the customers were real supportive. You know, like, we know you, we've been to your backyard, and we see you at market every week, and we don't need the government to bless you and say that you're organic. We know how you grow your produce. And that was when we were really small and selling $100, $200, $300 of produce a week, and that worked fine. But after farming in the backyard for a couple of years, in 2006 we started the CSA program, and by that time I'd taken over the whole yard. It was the front yard, the backyard, the side yard. I had a tire swing in the backyard, and I was pushing the kids out over the garden. And my wife was like, "Brenton," she's like, "this has gotten out of control. You've taken over the whole yard. You got chicken coop back here, compost piles, fruit trees, grapevines growing up all over the sides of the fences, and you got vegetables in the front yard and over across the front fence." It was so she insisted that we find a new place to live that was a little bit bigger, and lucky enough I was able to find 20 acres just east of downtown for a really, really good price. And we bought 20 acres and expanded in 2007, and started our new CSA in 2008. And so the first year in 2007, it was done all with volunteers while I was working full-time with the federal government. And then in the January of 2008, I just made a huge leap. I made the decision to quit my government job as an engineer and to become a farmer full-time. And I was at a point where we had a customer base of about, I think at that time it was maybe around 100 CSA members. But I think by the end of that year, or at least 2009, our CSA had grown to 450 members. And so, you know, at that time that's our main market, was our CSA. We really in 2008, we didn't hardly even sell at the farmers market at all. We didn't sell to any restaurants or any wholesalers, and all of our labor was done by interns. But it was a big leap. But once I started farming full time in 2008, then I made the decision to become certified organic. I had farmers in Austin that I really looked up to, and really kind of the way that I learned how to farm was I looked around the country and I tried to find the farmers that were the best farmers in the country to be friends with and learn from. I learned from Roxbury Farm in Kinderhook, New York. It's John Paul Corten's. Amazing resources on his website. Harmony Valley Farm, I learned from Richard DeWild. I looked up to Andrew Stout at Full Circle Farm in Carnation, Washington. Full Belly Farm, Eat Well, Nigel Walker. Then Capay was another farm in the Capay Valley in California. But I would call these farms up and ask questions and look at their websites and really, try to see what kind of equipment they were using. So what I tried to do was find farmers that were organic farmers and see, well, how do they control weeds? What systems do they use for production? When I grew up in Alabama, it really was, organics were something that you didn't even hear about. I think when I first started hearing about organics, it was when I was following the Grateful Dead around and, just heard a little bit about it, but I really didn't know what organics meant. And when I was in the backyard, I didn't truly know what I wanted to be an organic grower, but I didn't know what an organic grower was. And I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I remember going on to Craigslist and I was thinking, well, how am I going to fertilize my plants? They need to grow, but I don't know what kind of fertilizer to use. And I was taking, horse manure that I went and picked up and tucking it around my little lettuce plants. And in a week or so, those things were growing so good. And I was like, oh man, this is amazing. I'm an organic farmer now. But I just didn't realize that, my chicken coop that was right next, just a few inches away from the vegetables, those chickens were scratching in there and all that dust was flying over the vegetables and the salad greens. And I didn't know that, I guess I just didn't, I feel so bad now, looking back. I should have known clearly, that was not a good way to do things. But I did make some mistakes like that. And I think that really one of the biggest benefits for being certified organic grower for me is just that being a new grower that didn't come up with the background in farming, I've just learned so much through becoming certified organic. It's really helped us tremendously with developing record-keeping systems on our farm. We've got an extensive system of record-keeping for everything that we do on the farm, and that's been one of the big changes. And it's one of the things that I like to caution farmers that are considering becoming certified organic, because one of the most important things to do is to think about if becoming certified organic is going to benefit you. Because when I first started out and I was selling at farmers markets and I was selling to my CSA, there was no, the customers did not demand that I be certified organic. There was a tremendous benefit for me becoming certified organic in 2008 that I learned so much about and learned how to become a better farmer, because I learned about manure use, proper manure use, composting. It's, when I went to college and I studied agricultural engineering and I was talking to people in college and saying, hey, I want to be a farmer, there just really wasn't a clear pathway for me to become a farmer. And I had to kind of create a pathway. And becoming certified organic really helped educate me to a lot of best management practices on the farm. But I think that one thing that to be cognizant of is that becoming a certified organic farm really does take a big commitment, and it takes quite a bit of time to maintain proper records and meeting with inspectors and doing all the things that are required to maintain in good standing with your certifier. And it can be expensive. Maybe the expense just isn't the certification cost, because with the cost share programs that are available and for smaller operations, the cost when we first started out was a very, very small part of it. But the amount of time that we spend now as our farm has grown to over 100 acres in production and growing year-round and growing 300 different crops and selling to restaurants and grocery stores and farmers markets and CSA, it's really it's a significant cost to our farm. I would estimate that we spend over $100,000 a year in salary for to do the work that's required to maintain the records, as well as the cost for our certification. I think this year we paid over $5,000 for our certification, and that's based on our certifier and his their fee structure. We have to pay the highest fee structure that the certifier has. I would say that if one advantage of being certified from a very small scale, though, is that organic certification is tremendously easier when the operation's small and less complex. When I first prepared my organic system plan, I took off. I think that I submitted my application before I quit my government job, and I'd taken off work in 2007 to go into the Texas Department of Agriculture, and I sat down in a conference room with all the papers and documentation that I had, and I filled out my organic system plan at TDA, where I had staff that would be able to help me with some of the process, and I did it in one afternoon in maybe a couple hours. But at that time, I didn't have any field history. I wasn't using any inputs, and it was a really simple process because my farmland had been, I had an affidavit from the previous landowner that I hadn't used any prohibited inputs for 3 years, and it was just a really easy thing to do. And then, since I've been certified since 2008, and each year as my operations got more complex, it's much easier to wait until your operation is. There's maybe things that you've done that weren't in compliance and could make it difficult and very expensive to certify. It's a lot harder for farms to go from, I think, a conventional farm to transition to an organic, because it's just a costly and time-consuming process. And I would encourage people that are looking for land to try to find land that could be certified organic immediately. And both times when I purchased farmland, we purchased 20 acres, a 40-acre tract, and a 150-acre tract. And all three of those tracts we were able to find that met the requirements to be certified immediately. Because here in Texas, where we are, we just have some land that just people aren't utilizing for farmland, and it's just been sitting idle, and that's been a big advantage for us. I would like to mention a few of the benefits to being certified organic. We do get a much better price for our product. We, in our market in Austin, we have Whole Foods is based here, and Central Market is a subsidiary of HEB. It's another specialty grocer similar to Whole Foods that if we were conventional growers, we for a lot of the produce that we sell wholesale, it might be less than half of the price that we get for a certified organic product. Like both of these grocery store chains right now are trying to recruit growers to produce. They're having open houses, meet and greet sessions with the buyers, and they're actively working to cultivate growers to help provide produce for those farms. And so there is a demand, an unmet demand in Austin that for organic produce. And I guess for me is that I want to be able to say legally that my produce is organic, and I think that if if you're not certified, you can't tell people that, hey, I've grown this produce organically, or my farm is organic, and that's a common question that we get at the farmers market from customers. Another benefit that our farmers received is that we've been made eligible for funding through NRCS that otherwise, if we weren't organic, we wouldn't be eligible for. So the Natural Resources Conservation Service has. They have two programs that we participated in that were really helpful to us. And one was the Organic EQIP program, where when we purchased our 150-acre farm, that was transitioned from conventional to organic, and we were provided incentives under that program that really added up to very significant amounts of dollars for our farm. It was $50,000 to $80,000 over the course of a number of years. We had two different contracts under that. And then we also just recently, another new program that I just found out about that we are participating in now is the Conservation Stewardship Program. And that some of the things that, since we are certified organic, a lot of the things that we're doing really fit well within that program. And so it's a really great benefit with the things that we're already doing as an organic farm to be able to get some additional financial assistance to expand those practices. I think that the biggest change that I would say from just maybe a small farm that decides to make the change to becoming certified organic is that when I first started out, all I was doing was in the field all the time and just growing produce and selling it. And with becoming certified organic, it does force the producer to spend much more time, and it's not all wasted, but in record keeping and organization and documenting practices. I had a few tips that I wanted to share for farmers looking to become certified organic, and I guess just a few of the things that I would recommend for people that are looking to be certified organic is, first is look for a certifier that has experience with operations, working with operations similar to yours. And it might be difficult to find this out, but you want someone that is going to pick up the phone and be able to answer questions in a timely manner. Because as an organic farm, there's always questions on, am I allowed to do this, or am I allowed to use this input? And you really have to find a certifier that can answer those questions right away, because there are a lot of decisions in farming. You can't wait 2 or 3 months for a response. You have to have a response that day or the next day. And so that would be one thing that I would really strongly recommend people look for, is don't look for the lowest price in certifiers, but look for the best service. I would recommend that growers considering organic certification read the NOP standards and rules and become familiar with the requirements. And it doesn't take too long. It is dry, but you have to know what you're considering subscribing to before you make the leap. Like, don't go and start filling out an organic system plan and paying fees before you truly understand the requirements. And then another thing to do is really consider the 3-year rule for any prohibited inputs. Treated seeds, unapproved inputs, fertilizers, or pest control products. This can be a big problem, and Leslie did cover this. But if you've used these prohibited materials on your land or the previous landowner has, then there is potentially an obstacle to becoming certified anytime soon. And so those are some things to consider. How did I learn how to farm organically? Well, I didn't come from a farming background. I did a lot of gardening, but I did, the way that I learned how to farm organically was that I just spent a tremendous amount of time reading. And I'd like to recommend a couple of good books for people. But one book that I would especially recommend that I read to this day regularly is The New Organic Grower by Elliott Coleman. And that is just like a Bible for a small scale 5-acre grower that really gives a good foundation for farming organically. Secondly, I'd recommend that people visit as many farms as they can. I learned so much from Boggy Creek Farm here in Austin and signing up for newsletters from farms all over the country. And then any opportunity, any trip that I would take, go and seek out farms to try to look at their operation. And it's amazing just when you go to a farm how much you can learn in such a short amount of time. And I really don't think of myself as an expert. I am learning so much every day. And we just really keep trying new things all the time and just keep trying to learn more. I spent a tremendous amount of time on the web, and these days I don't have quite as much time, but I would highly recommend that people check out the ATRA website and look at all the resources that are available. When we first started out, we also used the ATRA website to help advertise for our internship program. And that was how we started our farm from scratch. I mean, the whole farm that I have started in the backyard, and it just was made $1 at a time. I didn't come from a trust fund or get financial help from my parents, but it was built from scratch. And it was built from starting with volunteers and then adding the first employee, and now we have nearly 100 employees, or over 100 employees. And so I would recommend there are a lot of good opportunities on the web. And lastly, I haven't done this as much, but I have done some. There's a lot of good conferences and associations that you can learn a lot and network with and make connections with the organic community. Here in Texas, we have the TOFGA, the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. It's a really good group, and we also have a Growers Association in Austin called Grow Act. It's the Growers Alliance of Central Texas, and that's we get together regularly to meet at a farm and talk farming. And so I think that organic certification, even though it is a lot of work and it does cost, I know that as our farm has grown, and I don't know every one of our customers anymore, that they really enjoy the assurance and credibility that organic certification provides. And so I think that is a big benefit. But again, it does depend on the markets that you sell to, and each individual has to weigh out if it provides the amount of time that it takes to become certified is justified. Some additional certifications that growers might have to consider is that since we handle organic citrus and organic eggs that we do not produce ourselves, there might be additional certifications that your organic certifier may require. And these, for us, is an organic handler certification. And so that was something that just recently that we've had to do in, I think, the last couple of years. We didn't start out with it initially, and then it popped up that, oh yeah, we have to have this handler certification. And so that's something to be aware of. I think that one of the things that I haven't really talked about, but we have a very, very extensive crop production model is what I call it. But what we've done is we've, over the past, since I started farming on the 20 acres, in 2007, 2008, is that I've been working with my brother and a number of employees over these years to develop a crop production model that helps us with our record keeping, and it helps us manage the complex task of growing 300 different crops year-round. And there's tools available for growers that are similar to this that are available commercially, but we found that we just wanted to be in charge of we found that it was best for us to devote the time to developing a tool that was customized to our needs rather than taking something off the shelf. And so we were fortunate enough to have the skills within our staff to develop this spreadsheet planning tool that models our production. Basically what it does is we've created a farm map that is representative of our fields over time. And so we came up with this concept called a crop tag that shows the length of a crop, that the time that it would be growing. So maybe a broccoli crop tag, say, might be 10 weeks from the time that it's transplanted to the time that it is harvested. And using these crop tags, we place them on a spreadsheet that includes a calendar, and it represents our fields. And then this is really helpful for us judging and doing our crop planning, so we can estimate when do we need to plant, when do we need to harvest, when do we need to do all the operations that are required on the farm, and we can calculate all the different things that are required. It's been a really, really neat tool that we've showed a lot of different people, and they've just been really impressed because the spreadsheet program has macros built into it that create greenhouse reports for us. So each week, like we're in week 32 now, or 33, and the greenhouse reports tell our greenhouse manager what to seed every week. Next week we have 1,600 flats to seed. Each flat has 128 plants in it, so we have a really big seeding week next week. But we also have a field report that it tells which beds need to be prepared ahead of time, and then we follow that through each of the departments in the farm. We also have a harvest report, and so a tool like that for diversified vegetable growers is something that is really, really beneficial. And I think the trick for growers is that when you make the decision, or whether you make it or not, to become certified organic, is to create a system that is not just for organic certification, but try to make the work that you do beneficial to your farming operation and business as well. And that's what we've tried to do, is share the burden and the like I did mention, I think it might be $100,000 we spend on the time required for organic certification. Make that time not just for organic certification, but make it where you're really spending the time and it's benefiting in the planning for the operation, so that you didn't make a miscalculation and buy too much drip tape or too much compost or too little compost, and where you seeded the right number of flats and you're not short where you plant enough. A tool, whether it's a purchase tool or where there's one that's developed over the years, is invaluable to a diversified vegetable farm. And I would say the farmers, really have to discover that time spent planning is time well spent. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is the greenhouse, and this is something that growers might not have considered. But when you're certified organic, when we first started out, we purchased some transplants in our backyard, but we couldn't find any certified organic transplants around. If you're an organic grower, you can't use conventionally grown transplants, and you have to either have a source that you can buy the varieties that you want, or you have to contract with someone that's an organic grower, or you have to grow them yourself. And I want to be responsible for my own transplants and not be mad with someone because they all died and we didn't have any plants to plant. And so we've made the investment, and now we have 7 greenhouses. We're working on four new ones today that we bought used, and we've really been working hard over the past 2 months to get finished up. And if you'd like to kind of see a little bit of our farm and what we're doing, I'd encourage you guys to go to our website. It's jbgorganic.com and sign up for our newsletter. And that's really a good opportunity to learn how we do things and learn. Sign up for as many different farm newsletters as you can, and I think that you would learn a lot. But thanks so much for your time today, and it's really been a pleasure to talk to you guys about organic farming and tell you about our farm.
Brenton, thank you so much for your story. It is an amazing story. I was very pleased to hear all the details that you shared with us. We have gone over time-wise, so we'll not take any questions today. I do want to let y'all know that we will respond to each of y'all's questions individually within the next week. I also want to remind you to take the survey before you sign off. We will also have another webinar next Thursday about noon Central Standard Time about what's in an organic farm plan. And it'll be essentially the same type of presentation. The lady from TDA who runs their organic program will be the first part of the program, and then we'll have a farmer from the Austin area, Greengate Farms, to talk about their real-world experience and applying the organic program to their farm. We really appreciate y'all being here with us today, and we look forward to having y'all next Thursday. So with that, we will sign off.